I remember the night Buckhead went silent. Not quiet, not peaceful. Silent, like someone had pressed mute on the city itself. It was a humid September night in Atlanta, the kind where the air feels heavy enough to make you sweat just standing still. Streetlights shimmered on the slick pavement, reflecting the soft gold glow of the luxury stores that lined Peachtree Road. It should have been just another night in the city's richest district. BMWs rolling past, champagne dinners, designer bags flashing under the lights. But at 8:42 p.m., everything changed. Bennett & Company was the kind of jewelry store that didn't bother with flashy signs. Its windows were frosted, its door discreet. The kind of place where customers came by appointment only, and where a single diamond necklace could cost more than a house. That night, 2 customers were inside. A young woman, a fashion consultant named Elena Ward, and an older man, Mr. Bennett himself. The security guard, Charles, stood by the door like he always did, sipping his late coffee. At 8:43, the cameras caught 3 figures walking up to the storefront. They were calm, unhurried, dressed in expensive black suits. But what froze everyone who later saw the footage wasn't the guns. It was the masks. They weren't ski masks or balaclavas. They were porcelain masks, white, smooth, and motionless. The kind that looked hand-painted, with faint cracks under the eyes, as if they were smiling just a little too softly. When the first gunshot echoed through Buckhead, no one understood what had happened. Cars kept rolling. Music still played from the rooftop bars. But the next sound, the second, sharper crack, carried through the streets like thunder. Inside, chaos erupted. Charles reached for his weapon, but the first shot hit him in the shoulder. He went down instantly. Elena screamed, ducking behind the counter. Mr. Bennett hit the alarm, or tried to, but the alarm never sounded. The lights flickered once, then dimmed, and the entire store fell into a thick, suffocating silence. When the police reviewed the footage later, they saw something that still makes even seasoned detectives shiver. At 8:44, all 3 masked figures turned their heads toward the security camera at the same time. No hesitation, no rush, just a slow, synchronized tilt, like puppets recognizing an audience. And that's when the feed went black. When officers arrived 6 minutes later, the front door was unlocked. The jewelry cases were shattered, glass scattered like frozen starlight. Mr. Bennett was found behind the counter, shot once in the chest. Elena was beside him, her hand still reaching out toward his. Charles, barely alive, whispered one thing before passing out. They were already inside. No one knew what he meant at the time, but as the investigation unfolded, that single sentence became the heart of the nightmare that followed. Because the alarms, every sensor, every camera feed, had been shut off from inside the store. Someone had opened the doors for them. Someone Bennett trusted. And those porcelain masks? They weren't just costumes. They were signatures. The next morning, Buckhead woke to the flashing lights of patrol cars and the echo of helicopters circling overhead. The jewelry boutique, Bennett & Company, sat behind yellow tape like a crime scene from a movie no one wanted to star in. Reporters whispered phrases like precision attack, no signs of forced entry, and they knew the place. The police chief's voice cracked as he described it. They came in fast, knew the angles, took what they wanted, left no prints, and they smiled into the cameras. At first, people thought he was speaking metaphorically, until the footage leaked online. In the grainy night vision video, 3 figures appeared from the back door, one after another, as if stepping out of the walls themselves. They wore porcelain masks, featureless but eerily delicate, painted like the cracked faces of antique dolls. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth white curves and a faint, hollow sheen reflecting the store lights. The first robber moved with mechanical precision, cutting the wires to the alarm panel. The second herded the terrified staff into the corner. And the third, the one in the long coat, simply stood still, watching the others, head tilted slightly, as if admiring the scene. When the gunshots came, they were muffled, quick, clinical. 2 lives snuffed out, just like that. But what made the footage viral wasn't the brutality. It was the moment afterward. All 3 figures turned toward the security camera and bowed. The clip spread across TikTok and Reddit under hashtags like #BuckheadMasks and #PorcelainHeist, drawing millions of horrified views. Comments flooded in. Looks like a scene from The Purge. Those masks are too perfect, like they were custom made. Anyone else notice the reflection behind them? Yes, the reflection. In one still frame, the faint outline of a 4th figure appeared in the display glass. No mask, just a pale face, open-mouthed, as if screaming silently at the camera. But no such person was found in the store. Later, detectives confirmed it wasn't a trick of the light. The reflection belonged to no one in the footage. And somehow, every time the video was re-uploaded, the reflection's face seemed closer. That night, residents of Buckhead locked their doors earlier than usual. Some claimed they could hear faint footsteps in the alley behind the boutique, slow, deliberate, and uneven, like the echo of porcelain cracking with every step. By the third day after the heist, Atlanta was no longer treating it as just another crime. The story had mutated into something darker, something that crawled under the skin of anyone who watched that footage long enough. The reflection, the pale, mouthless face in the glass. When WSBDV slowed down the tape frame by frame, technicians confirmed something chilling. The fourth figure's face didn't just appear, it moved. Its expression shifted, pixel by pixel, from a scream to a smile. And then came the reports. A woman living across from Bennett and Company called 911 one night, trembling. "There's someone in the window. The store's empty, but I see him. The white face. It's just standing there." When police arrived, the boutique was dark and sealed. But the display window, the same one that reflected the fourth figure, had handprints on the inside of the glass. They weren't human-sized, too long, too thin, and somehow pressed from the inside out. Meanwhile, online communities turned the crime into a digital ghost story. Some believed the fourth figure was the spirit of the store owner, trapped in the glass when the gun went off. Others said it was something else, something that came with the masks. Because a strange connection began to surface. Across forums and police databases, people started tracing a trail of small thefts, pawn shops, antique markets, art collectors. Each case involved someone who had reportedly handled porcelain masks imported from Europe. Each time, security cameras would malfunction. Each time, someone would end up dead. A retired FBI consultant told a local paper off record. "Those masks aren't new. They match a style from a Venetian theater troupe in the 1800s. The kind that used real human bone powder to make the glaze." But it was one particular photo, leaked from inside evidence storage, that finally pushed the city into panic. It showed one of the seized masks lying on a stainless steel table, cracked, faintly dusty. Except in the corner of the photo, if you looked closely enough, the mask's reflection in the metal tray was smiling. The officer who took that photo never returned to duty. They found his service weapon in his car outside the precinct 2 days later. He had written one word on his notepad: 4. That was when the rumor began, the one Atlanta still whispers every Halloween. There were never 3 robbers. There were 4. And the fourth never left the store. When federal agents tracked down the first suspect, Elias Mercado, he was holed up in a cheap motel off Biscayne Boulevard, a place with flickering fluorescent lights and curtains stiff with salt and dust. He'd shaved his head, burned his clothes, and smashed his phone. But the porcelain mask was still with him, wrapped in an old towel, hidden beneath the mattress. When the FBI kicked the door open, they found Mercado sitting on the floor, his eyes wide, muttering to himself. His gun was untouched, but the walls, all 4 of them, were covered in mirror shards, arranged in strange circular patterns, glinting like a nest of broken glass. An agent later recalled the moment in an internal report. He kept saying there were 4 of them, that he wasn't supposed to be the one who lived. When they tried to cuff him, Mercado screamed, "He's here! He's here!" Then the lights went out. Only for 3 seconds. When they came back on, Mercado was slumped forward, eyes open, neck twisted at an impossible angle, as if something had gripped his jaw and turned his head too far. The mask, still wrapped in its towel, now lay unwrapped on the bed. Its mouth, previously uncarved, had split open into a perfect, silent smile. The agents swore it hadn't been like that before. One of them, Special Agent Rivera, demanded the hotel's CCTV footage. The camera above the door captured everything: the entry, the struggle, the blackout. But during those 3 seconds of darkness, the feed didn't go black. Instead, the frame showed a dim glow, and within that glow stood 4 figures, facing the camera. 3 with guns, 1 with a porcelain mask. When forensic teams later enhanced the image, the last figure's face seemed to breathe in the static. The timestamp flickered between 3:03 a.m. and 13:03 a.m., a time that doesn't exist. The FBI sealed the footage immediately, but one agent leaked a frame to a private chat forum. Within days, people online began claiming strange things. Some said their phone screens glitched when they zoomed in. Others claimed they saw a reflection of a mask behind them. for just a moment, when the image loaded. Then the first death happened. A man in Tampa who posted about the leaked frame was found dead in his apartment. Mirrors shattered, laptop melted from a short circuit. No fingerprints, no forced entry. Just one word typed into a blank note on his desktop. Smile. Back in Atlanta, detectives began to connect the dots. Everyone involved, from the robbers to the forensics team, started having nightmares. Dreams of being watched through glass. Dreams of something standing just outside their reflection. They called it the Mirror Man, a legend born from a crime, but one that was starting to feel less like a legend and more like a curse. By the second week of October, the city of Atlanta had started to whisper. Not about the murders, not even about the robbery, but about what was caught on camera. News outlets were told to stay quiet. Bennett and Company was sealed shut, its display cases still filled with dust and dried blood. The FBI issued a statement about ongoing investigations and unrelated cyber leaks. But people had already seen the image. The blurred figures in the motel footage, the porcelain mask, the impossible timestamp. And then there was her, Mara Kincaid, a crime journalist known for chasing what others wouldn't touch. She'd written about cults in Kentucky, a haunted slaughterhouse in Ohio, and once spent 3 nights in an abandoned asylum just for a story. Now she wanted this one. Mara had a way of making horror sound like truth. Her podcast, After Midnight, had over 2 million listeners, and she knew exactly how to feed their hunger for something forbidden. When she got the first anonymous email with the subject line Buckhead footage, she thought it was a prank. But the body of the email contained a single phrase. He smiles when you look away. And attached, a still frame. The motel footage. Same timestamp. Same porcelain mask. But this time, the mask wasn't in the motel. It was behind her. At least, that's what it looked like. A reflection in her office window. Faint, human-shaped, but not hers. She turned instantly. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the night outside her apartment. Still, she couldn't shake it. The way the mask seemed to be leaning closer in the image. How it felt like it knew her name. Mara decided to investigate the source. Using metadata from the email, she traced it to a server in Decatur, Georgia, not far from where one of the missing suspects used to live. The address led her to a small, abandoned beauty salon. Inside, the air smelled of burnt hair and dust. Broken mirrors lined the walls, all covered with paper and duct tape. And on one of those mirrors, someone had scrawled in black marker, "Don't look too long." Mara lifted the tape from the largest mirror. Behind it, faint fingerprints, smears of blood, and words etched with a key. They see you when you reflect them. The lights flickered. Her reflection didn't. For half a second, her reflection smiled, though she hadn't. And then the bulbs popped, plunging the salon into total darkness. She bolted for the door, heart pounding, phone shaking in her hand as she tried to turn on the flashlight. When the light finally came on, there it was again, faint, in the reflection of her phone screen this time. The mask. But this time, the mouth wasn't smiling. It was open. Mara didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on her living room floor, laptop open, voice recorder running. The apartment was dim except for a small lamp, the kind that made shadows crawl across the walls when you moved even a little. She hit record and spoke softly, as if afraid something else might be listening. "This is Mara Kincaid. October 14th, Buckhead heist case. I've been contacted by someone who might have footage the FBI doesn't want us to see." Her voice cracked slightly. She paused, pressing her fingers against her temples. "The footage shows more than people. I think it shows what's behind them." A pause. The faint hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed in the distance, long, distorted, fading into the kind of silence that made you aware of every creak in your bones. She saved the file and labeled it Episode Draft 1 Porcelain. But as she did, she noticed something strange. The waveform on her screen kept moving. Even though she wasn't speaking, she leaned in, squinting. The sound was faint, static, almost like breathing. Then a whisper. "Say it again." Mara froze. Her throat tightened. She unplugged the mic immediately. The waveform flattened. She played it back, thinking maybe it was a glitch. But no, the voice was there. "Say it again." Her reflection, caught in the laptop screen, looked different, eyes darker, head tilted slightly to the side, as if listening to something behind her. She turned. Nothing. The next morning, she went back to the abandoned beauty salon. The police tape was gone. Someone had been there. The mirrors that were once covered had been cleaned, polished, gleaming, unnaturally so. Each reflected her face in eerie clarity, though the air inside was thick with mold and dust. And yet, when she tried to record, the footage glitched. Every reflection flickered, just a fraction of a second out of sync. In one frame, she saw something impossible. The reflection didn't follow her. It stayed still. She left immediately. That night, her podcast went live, just a teaser clip. A calm voice saying, "They see you when you reflect them," followed by the sound of glass cracking. It was enough to make people curious. Enough to make her trending overnight. The comments section exploded. "This can't be real, right? She's using that Buckhead story for clout." Wait, did anyone else hear that breathing at the end? Mara didn't respond. She couldn't, because when she checked the analytics page, there was one listener from a private IP, located less than a mile away, labeled simply as Bennett. It was 9:37 p.m. when Mara heard the knock. 3 dull, deliberate thuds. Not the kind of knock that comes from a neighbor or a friend. It was heavy, like someone testing the strength of the door. She froze mid-step. Her apartment was dark, the only light coming from the laptop on her desk, still showing that anonymous listener's IP location blinking on the map. She waited. Another knock. This time softer, almost polite. "Ms. Kincaid." The voice was deep, calm, controlled, the kind of tone that came with authority or practice. "It's Agent Rowe, with the Bureau." Her heart began to pound. She hadn't told anyone about the recording or the footage or even her theory about the mirrors. She opened the door just an inch, keeping the chain lock in place. The man standing outside wore a dark suit and a rain-speckled coat. His ID badge gleamed faintly in the hallway light, but something about it was off. It was too pristine, too new. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you've been investigating the Bennett and Company case," he said. "We'd like to talk about what you've found." She hesitated. "Who's we?" He tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. Then, without missing a beat, "The people who don't want you to end up like the others." Her blood ran cold. "What others?" The man's expression didn't change. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a small, sealed plastic bag. Inside was a cracked porcelain fragment, the same kind used in the masks the robbers had worn. "This was found near your building," he said. "Do you know why?" Mara shook her head. He stepped closer, the toe of his shoe just touching the threshold. "Because they were here, and they weren't looking for jewelry this time." Then he smiled, a slow, unnatural stretch of lips that didn't seem humanly possible. The hallway lights flickered once, twice. When Mara blinked, the man was gone. No footsteps, no sound of retreating down the stairs. Just the faint smell of dust and something metallic, blood maybe lingering in the air. She slammed the door shut and locked it. All 5 deadbolts. Her phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: "Do not trust the mirrors." Sender: ro.fbi@secure.gov. The timestamp said it was sent 10 minutes before the knock. Mara's hands trembled as she scrolled down. No message. No attachments. Just one line in the body of the email. "They're not done with Buckhead." She looked up, slowly, toward the mirror by her entryway. For a moment, her reflection looked normal. Then it blinked. And she didn't. For the next 2 days, Mara barely slept. She covered every mirror in her apartment with towels, bedsheets, even newspaper. Anything to block her own reflection. But glass is a tricky thing. It's everywhere once you start looking. The microwave door. The black screen of her turned-off TV. The window above her kitchen sink. Every surface seemed to catch her, even for a second. Her shape, her eyes, just a shimmer of her movement where there shouldn't be one. And sometimes it moved wrong. It started subtle. She'd turn her head to the left, and the reflection would lag. Half a second, maybe less. Enough for her brain to whisper, that wasn't normal. Then one morning, she woke to find the mirror in the bathroom uncovered. She didn't remember taking the towel down. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. Exactly as she looked, except it wasn't breathing. Her chest rose and fell, the reflections did not. She backed away slowly, heart hammering, when her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. No message. Just a video attachment. The thumbnail was a paused frame of the Bennett and Company. CCTV footage, the masked robbers in the jewelry store. She opened it. The footage started normal, as she'd seen before. The men entering, guns drawn, shouting. But halfway through, the video changed. The 4th figure appeared again in the reflection of the glass. Only this time, the reflection didn't stay behind. It stepped forward. One pale porcelain mask, smooth as bone, pushing through the glass like it was water. Mara dropped the phone. The video kept playing. The sound wasn't just gunfire anymore. There was whispering underneath, layered, reversed, like multiple voices murmuring the same word over and over. 4, 4, 4. Her phone screen began flickering, colors warping, the camera turning on by itself. The lens pointed straight at her face, and behind her, just over her shoulder, a faint white blur in the darkened hallway. She turned instantly. Nothing, but the smell came again. That metallic tang like old coins and wet iron. And faintly underneath it, something else. Porcelain dust. She checked her door. Still locked. Every latch in place. Then, from inside the bathroom, a small, sharp sound. Tap, tap, tap. She looked toward the mirror she'd covered again. The towel was on the floor. A thin crack ran down the middle of the glass, from top to bottom, like something had scratched its way through from the other side. Her phone buzzed once more, vibrating on the counter. Another email. Subject, look. And when she did, her reflection smiled first. By the end of that week, Atlanta had changed. People started covering mirrors. Not just in apartments, but in cafes, offices, even police stations. There were stories, whispered, half-believed, about reflections acting on their own. Elevator cameras that caught faces that didn't belong. Shop windows showing customers who were never there. And always, somewhere in the grainy footage, the faint outline of a mask. It started downtown. A woman working late at an architecture firm claimed she saw a man standing inside the mirrored wall of their lobby. Security checked the feed, and saw him too. A still, expressionless figure in white. When they went downstairs, the glass was cracked in a perfect circle where his face had been. 2 days later, a delivery driver reported his dashcam recorded itself. He said the file name was just 4 numbers, 0004.mp4. When he opened it, it showed him driving his usual route. Except in the reflection of the rearview mirror, there was another van following close behind. Identical, license plate and all. No one ever found that second van. By then, Mara was no longer sleeping in her apartment. She'd moved to a small hotel in Decatur, room 203, one without mirrors, she made sure of it. But the sense of being watched didn't fade. Sometimes at night, when she glanced at the black TV screen, she'd see the faint curve of a shoulder behind her. Once, she thought she saw fingers, 5 long, bone-white ones, pressing against the inside of the screen. She started talking to herself to stay sane, whispering under her breath. It's not real. It's not real. It's just glass. It's just. Then a knock on the door. 3 dull thuds. Her breath caught. She didn't move. Not again. But this time, a different voice. Mara, it's Detective Reynolds. Open up. Please. She froze. Reynolds. The Atlanta PD detective she'd spoken to weeks earlier. She hesitated, then peeked through the peephole. It was him. Same weary eyes, same raincoat. He looked exhausted. She unlatched the door, but only halfway. Detective? He looked over her shoulder, as if scanning the room. You've been seeing things, haven't you? They told me you were asking questions. Who told you? He rubbed a hand across his jaw. The Bureau. They said to keep you safe. But I don't think they can. Mara felt her throat go dry. Why not? He took a slow step closer. The hallway light flickered again, just once, and for a brief second his shadow stretched across her door and didn't match his movement. When the light came back, his face looked different. Smoother. Still human, but wrong, like his skin was stretching to fit something that didn't belong underneath. Because they're already here, he whispered. Then the power went out, and in the black reflection of the TV behind her, faint but unmistakable, 3 porcelain faces stood where she should have been alone. When the lights flicked back on, everything was silent. The room looked untouched. Bed neatly made, curtains drawn tight, her bag by the dresser, like no one had ever been there. The hotel clerk, a woman named Denise, swore she'd heard the scream around 11:42 p.m. sharp. She'd been at the front desk, counting receipts, when the building's power surged and flickered. A high metallic crack echoed through the hallway, like shattering glass, followed by a short, sharp sound that didn't quite belong to the living. When she and the night guard ran to room 203, the door was locked from the inside. They pounded on it until a hinge came loose. The first thing they noticed when they finally broke through wasn't the smell, though that came soon after, but the temperature. The air inside was cold, not the kind of chill from bad insulation, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you want to stop breathing. The bed was empty, the windows unbroken. The sheets and carpet were coated in a thin layer of white dust. Porcelain. The television was on. A static screen hissed softly, flickering with the faint outline of something moving. A figure, perhaps, but impossible to focus on. Denise took one shaky step closer. "Hello, Miss Kincaid." No answer. The guard lifted the TV remote, intending to turn it off, but froze mid-motion. There, reflected in the glass of the TV screen, were two people standing in the doorway. Denise and the guard, and a third, a woman, pale, trembling, standing between them in the reflection. Her mouth wide open in a silent scream. Denise gasped and turned, no one there. When she looked back at the screen, the reflection had changed again. Now, only the woman was visible. Her face cracked like fired clay, her eyes completely white. The remote dropped from the guard's hand, clattering to the floor. The static buzzed louder, turning into a thin whine that made the walls hum. And then, just for an instant, one clear frame appeared on the TV. CCTV footage, Bennett & Co., jewelry, the four figures, the glass, the moment before everything went wrong. Then the image folded in on itself. When police arrived 20 minutes later, there was no one in the room. Only the remote on the floor, the TV off, and a single line traced into the porcelain dust on the dresser. 4. Detective Miles Harlow wasn't a superstitious man. He'd seen enough chaos in his 20 years on the force to know that most ghost stories were just the result of panic, drugs, or guilt. But this case, refused to behave like anything else. The file landed on his desk 2 days after the incident at the Garden View Motel. Officially, the missing woman, Mara Kincaid, was still being treated as a disappearance. Unofficially, Harlow's precinct had already labeled room 203 a no-go. The report described impossible details. A locked door, no sign of forced entry. The layer of white dust tested positive for calcium and trace silica. Human remains fused with ceramic material. The CCTV system had burned out at 11:42 p.m., the exact moment the power flickered. The hard drive, when recovered, contained only one accessible file. Harlow opened it in the evidence room, his partner Ruiz watching from the corner. The label read, 11-42, final.mp4. The footage began with the hotel hallway, empty and still. Then movement. A dark figure approached the lens, blurred by motion. It paused just long enough for the outline of a woman's face to become visible. But it wasn't Mara Kincaid. It wasn't anyone in their database. Her features looked stretched, as if the camera had captured someone in mid-transformation, caught between a scream and silence. Her eyes reflected light unnaturally, like mirrors. Behind her, down the corridor, room 203's door began to rattle, violently. Ruiz swore softly. "Pause that. Look." Harlow froze the frame. The timestamp in the corner had glitched, the digits twisted and inverted, flickering between 11:42 and 2400 hours 11, a time that didn't exist. Then, for a split second, the image shifted, and they weren't looking at a hallway anymore. They were looking through it. A jewelry counter, a man reaching for a gun, a figure shattering glass. The same four shadows seen in the motel's static screen. Ruiz stumbled backward, knocking into a chair. The video kept playing by itself, the progress bar jumping erratically. And as it neared the end, the audio track filled with that same piercing whine Denise had described. Only now, buried beneath it, was a whisper. A single word, looped over and over. 444. The monitor screen cracked. Not all at once, but slowly, in a spiderweb pattern that started from the center and spread outward like frost. Harlow yanked the plug. The whisper continued for 3 more seconds before it finally went silent. Neither man spoke. They didn't file the recording into evidence again. They locked it in the bottom drawer, sealed in an envelope labeled contaminated, and agreed not to mention what they saw. That night, when Harlow drove home, the reflection in his rearview mirror didn't match the road behind him. For a few seconds, he could have sworn he saw the hallway again. Room 203, door rattling, and a woman standing just outside the frame, waiting for him to blink. Detective Harlow woke to the smell of dust and burnt ozone. He was in his car, parked in front of his own house, engine off, keys still in the ignition. The clock on the dash read 3:17 a.m., though he didn't remember leaving the station. When he checked his phone, there were no calls, no texts, just one new file in his gallery. img_0423.jpg. The thumbnail showed nothing but darkness. He opened it, squinting at the faint grain of static noise, until he realized the pixels were forming the outline of a door. Room 203. He deleted the image immediately. The phone froze, buzzed, and restored the file again. He tried again, and again. Each time he deleted it, the file returned, brighter, clearer, closer. By dawn, he had stopped trying. At the precinct, Ruiz wasn't there. His desk was empty, his badge missing. When Harlow asked the sergeant on duty, the reply chilled him. Ruiz? He's been on medical leave since last week. Panic attack. You were the one who filed the report. Harlow's blood went cold. He hadn't seen Ruiz since the footage incident 2 nights ago. Or was it 2 nights? He couldn't remember sleeping. In the locker room, his reflection flickered, a subtle glitch, like poor signal on an old VHS tape. He turned off the lights and waited. After a few seconds, he heard it again, the faint electric whine. He whispered, "What do you want from me?" The mirror didn't answer, but the reflection behind him changed. The locker room stretched, warped, metal benches replaced by tiled walls. And there it was again, room 203, reassembled perfectly, down to the peeling wallpaper and the soft hum of a broken TV. Except this time, there was no door, only a mirror. In its reflection, a figure stood motionless, wearing a porcelain mask cracked down the center. The mask was half human, half clay. The eyes behind it were familiar. It was Ruiz. He lifted his hand slowly and pressed it against the mirror. When his palm touched the glass, Harlow's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked down. The camera had turned on by itself, facing outward. The live image showed both of them, Harlow and Ruiz, standing together in the room. But when he glanced up, Ruiz wasn't there. The mirror began to melt, surface rippling like hot wax. From within it, faint voices echoed, radio chatter, sirens, gunfire. The Bennett and Company jewelry store, the sound of that night replaying on loop. And beneath it all, that whisper again. Inside job, inside job. The mirror cracked. This time, Harlow didn't look away. The porcelain figure stepped forward, glass crunching beneath its shoes. It reached out, placing the mask gently in his hands. The porcelain was cold, yet the shape of the eyes, the mouth, the curve of the jaw, they were his. A perfect replica of his own face. He tried to drop it, but his fingers wouldn't obey. The whisper grew louder. The air thickened. The lights blinked once, and the room was gone. Harlow was back in his car again, dashboard clock still reading 3:17 a.m. But this time, he wasn't alone. From the passenger seat, a faint reflection shimmered on the glass, a mask half cracked, smiling faintly. By the time the FBI arrived, the case had begun to rot, not in the usual bureaucratic way, but digitally. Files disappeared. Evidence logs rewrote themselves. Even the incident report on the Bennett and Company murders, gone, as if it had never existed. Special Agent Dana McAdams sat in the cold glow of the data forensics lab at Quantico, staring at a blank directory. Her analyst had just confirmed something impossible. "Ma'am, this folder was overwritten by an AI reconstruction loop. But here's the weird part, it's using a voice pattern." "A voice?" she repeated. The analyst nodded. "Male, mid-40s, Scottish accent. It keeps saying the same thing. Inside job." McAdams leaned closer. Somewhere deep in the white noise of the corrupted file, she heard it too, distorted, warped, but undeniably human. And beneath it, something else breathing. The analyst looked pale. "That's not metadata, ma'am. That's live audio." The sound of breathing turned into a whisper, like a tape rewinding too fast. Then static. The monitor flickered. For half a second, the screen displayed a face. Porcelain white, no expression, hollow black eyes. Then it was gone. McAdams stood up. "Shut it down." But when the analyst reached for the power button, his hand froze midair. His expression drained of color. "Agent," he whispered. "Look." On the wall behind them, projected faintly by the screen's dying light, was an image. A blurred figure, standing in what looked like a morgue, surrounded by dozens of porcelain masks. Each mask had a name scratched beneath it. She recognized one instantly, Detective Harlow. Later that night, McAdams drove down to Atlanta. The old Bennett and Company storefront had been shuttered, sealed by police tape and silence. Inside, dust floated like ash through beams of moonlight. The counters were cracked, glass display cases smashed, the smell of burned wires thick in the air. She found the basement door slightly ajar. It creaked when she pushed it open. A set of narrow stairs led downward, into what felt less like a basement and more like a vault. At the bottom was a single table, a security console still humming weakly. The screen was alive. On it, grainy footage from room 203, the same hotel room connected to the murders, played on loop. Only this time, the timestamp read October 31st, 2025. Tonight, the video showed a man sitting alone at the table, his back to the camera, same build as Harlow. He was holding something, a porcelain mask. As McAdams watched, the man turned slowly toward the lens, and for the briefest instant, she saw his face clearly. It was hers. The monitor blinked out. Behind her, a faint shuffle, footsteps on tile. McAdams turned, flashlight trembling. No one. She pointed the light at the walls. Dozens of framed photographs lined the corridor, covered in grime. Each photo showed the same scene. People in police uniforms, sitting in briefing rooms, writing reports, but their faces had been erased. Scratched out. In the reflection of the glass, she noticed something else. At the far end of the hall, someone was standing perfectly still. White porcelain mask. No eyes. No sound. And yet, she could hear breathing again. The flashlight flickered. The power went out. And from the darkness, that phrase returned, soft at first, then rising until it filled the room. Inside job, inside job. When the lights came back on, Agent McAdams was gone. All that remained on the table was her badge, and a cracked porcelain mask with her initials carved into the underside. The morning of October 31st broke gray over Atlanta. The city was already restless. Halloween banners hung limp in the drizzle, and the usual chatter of Buckhead's cafes was subdued, nervous. Local news anchors spoke in careful tones. The Bennett and Company case was trending again. A leaked photo, one that hadn't come from police sources, was circulating online. A still image of FBI agent Dana McAdams sitting in the jewelry store basement, staring into a CCTV screen that showed her own face. No one knew where it came from. No one could verify if she was even alive. Then, around noon, people across the city began receiving strange messages. Private citizens, police officers, journalists, each received a single photo attachment, a candid image of themselves sitting at home, at work, or even driving, except every photo had one impossible detail. They were all wearing a white porcelain mask. The timestamp? October 31st, 11:59 p.m. Tonight, by evening, Atlanta was gripped in panic. Social media flooded with stories. People seeing figures in porcelain masks watching from across the street, standing motionless near traffic lights, reflected in rearview mirrors. Some claimed the masked figures whispered their names. Others said they heard nothing at all. The police received over 400 calls before midnight. Officers were dispatched, but by the time they arrived, the watchers were always gone. Only one thing was consistently found: a small white shard of porcelain, left on the ground like a calling card. At 10:17 p.m., a man named Malik Turner, who lived a block from the old Bennett and Company store, called 911. He sounded terrified. "They're back," he whispered. "They're walking in a line, all wearing the masks. They're heading toward the bridge." The dispatcher asked which bridge. He didn't answer. Only the sound of wind and distant footsteps filled the call. Then the line went dead. When officers reached the scene 20 minutes later, they found Malik's car still running, door open, headlights pointed toward the Peachtree Bridge. On the asphalt lay dozens of porcelain shards, forming a rough circle like a ritual outline. No blood, no footprints, no Malik. Meanwhile, in a high-rise apartment overlooking the district, Detective Harlow's widow, Marissa, sat trembling on her couch. She had just received her own photo. Her hands shook as she stared at it. Her reflection, standing in her kitchen, eyes covered by a smooth white mask, a hand on her shoulder. The timestamp read 11:58 p.m. From the kitchen came a quiet creak. She turned toward the sound. The fridge door was open. Inside, her phone buzzed, though she didn't remember putting it there. On the screen was a new notification. Live stream started, Bennett and Company. Security feed. Marissa pressed play. Static. Then faintly, the sound of heels clicking on tile. The camera view slowly came into focus. Rows of shattered display cases. And in the center of the store, a single figure, wearing a long coat, standing beneath a flickering light. The figure raised its head toward the camera. Porcelain mask. But this one was cracked, and beneath the cracks, Marissa saw a face she recognized instantly. Dana McAdams. Only now, her eyes were glassy and unfocused. Her lips moved, whispering something that bled into the static. "Inside job, it's not over." The feed cut. When the police arrived moments later, Marissa was gone. The only trace of her was the porcelain mask resting gently on the couch, still warm to the touch, as if someone had just taken it off. By midnight, 911 calls spiked citywide. People claimed their reflections were moving on their own. Phones rang from unknown numbers. And somewhere downtown, near the ruins of Bennett and Company, a new light flickered. A CCTV screen that shouldn't have had power. On it, a single phrase pulsed in white text, looping endlessly across the dark. The job's not done. 2 days after Halloween, Atlanta woke up quieter than usual. Too quiet. The local news stations were off air. Some claimed it was a network outage. Others whispered something darker, that the FBI had seized control of the feeds. The Bennett and Company heist had officially been closed. No remaining threat to the public, they said, but those who lived near Peachtree Bridge knew better. They still heard the footsteps at night, soft, measured, like someone pacing, just beneath the hum of the streetlights. At 3:11 a.m. on November 2nd, Channel 7 Atlanta went live unexpectedly. No anchor, no intro music, just a single, shaky feed from a camera pointed down the same jewelry store basement that had been sealed since the murders. The timestamp was current. No one was supposed to be there. The footage began with static, then movement. A flashlight beam swayed across the damp floor, illuminating rows of evidence boxes labeled Bennett and Company, 2025. The camera panned upward to reveal a man, unknown, wearing an FBI windbreaker, holding the light in one hand and a pistol in the other. This is Special Agent Carter. If anyone's seeing this, they lied to us. McAdams wasn't dead. His voice trembled as he approached the far wall. There, etched into the concrete in uneven letters, was a phrase. Inside job. He reached out to touch it, and the light flickered. From somewhere behind him came a faint scraping sound, like porcelain against tile. He turned, breathing hard. Who's there? The camera spun as his flashlight landed on the far corner. Standing there, half lit in the beam, was a woman, her hair wet, her face pale, her head tilted slightly to one side. It was Dana McAdams, or what was left of her. Her porcelain mask was fused to her skin, hairline to jaw, cracked from the gunshot wound that had once ended her life. Through the fractures, her mouth moved, but the voice didn't come from her. It came from the speakers of the camera itself. We never left. The feed began to distort. Dozens of faces flashed on screen. Security guards, customers, the missing detective, even Marissa, all wearing the same mask. Their lips moved in perfect synchronization. The job's not done. Carter screamed, fired 3 times, the sound echoing through the concrete chamber. And then the screen went black. For 13 minutes, the broadcast remained dark. Then, without warning, a faint image returned. The same basement, empty now. The flashlight on the floor, still rolling. And scrawled across the wall in blood-red letters. Thank you for watching. The next morning, Channel 7 denied any unauthorized broadcast had occurred. They claimed it was a hacker's hoax. But those who had seen it live, the few thousand night owls and horror streamers who happened to tune in, never forgot what came after. Their phones started ringing. No number, no name, just the faint sound of footsteps. And then, whispering, a woman's voice, too calm to be human. Inside job. Now it's yours. They say every year since, around Halloween, someone in Atlanta gets that same call. Always at 3:11 a.m. Always the same message. And sometimes, when they hang up, they catch a glimpse of their reflection, just for a second, smiling back at them from behind a porcelain mask.